It was supposed to be a proud moment, the kind you share with family. But when my sister Karen called and said, "We should really be managing the hair care business together. Let me handle the financials while you focus on marketing," I felt something snap inside me. I had worked for years to build my $760 Kelvin's hair care brand from the ground up, enduring sleepless nights and countless sacrifices. Yet here they were, my stepmother Meredith and my half-sister Karen, trying to take over the very thing I had built. I never asked for their help. I never needed it. But now, after years of silently supporting them, they had the audacity to claim what was mine. What followed was a battle for control that left me questioning everything: my family, my business, and even myself. Their attempts to manipulate and gaslight me escalated quickly, and when the emotional pressure became too much, I knew I had to take a stand to protect everything I had worked for. This is the story of how I fought to keep my business and my peace against a family that thought they could take it all away. It started innocently enough. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, when Meredith casually brought it up. My stepmother, ever so poised in her tailored suit, sat across from me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Katie, I've been thinking," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "You've done such a wonderful job with the business, but I think it might be time to get a little help with the financial side of things. You know, I've got years of experience managing assets. I could really help you grow." I froze, the cup halfway to my lips. Meredith, who had always been the cold, calculating figure in my life, was suddenly offering help? It didn't sit right with me. I had worked tirelessly to build my hair care line, from my first batch of handmade products to the thriving $760 Kelvin's business it was today. I had never asked anyone for help, not even my mom, who had passed away when I was young, and certainly not Meredith, who had always treated me as an outsider, an afterthought in her perfect world. But it didn't stop there. Karen, my half-sister, chimed in, her voice just as sweet but with an underlying tone of entitlement. "Yeah, Katie, I've been thinking the same thing," she said, her eyes gleaming with an idea she was clearly excited about. "You've got the creative side down, no doubt, but you could really use someone to handle the business side, don't you think? You could focus on being the face of the brand while Mom and I take care of all the boring stuff, the numbers, the investments, all the behind-the-scenes management." I felt my stomach turn. Being the face of my own business? It was more than just a brand to me. It was my life's work, my independence, my success. The thought of handing over the reins, even if it was just for the business side, made my chest tighten. I could hear Meredith's words, echoing in my mind. "I could really help you grow." Grow? Or take control? The words felt like a subtle trap. The more they spoke, the more I understood that this wasn't about helping me, it was about taking ownership. Karen and Meredith didn't want to share the spotlight with me. They wanted to place themselves at the center of it, as if I was nothing more than a tool to get them closer to the wealth and recognition they had always envied. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've got it handled. I've been managing just fine on my own, and I think I'd like to keep things that way." Meredith's smile faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered, her voice turning smoother. Of course. I'm sure you've done a fine job." Her words were laced with a thinly veiled sarcasm, but she pressed on. "I just think you've got so much potential, Katie. You've built something incredible. Why not? Let us help take it to the next level. With my experience and Karen's connections, you could be unstoppable." I felt a sickening twist in my gut. It wasn't the first time I'd heard this. It was the same kind of talk I'd grown up hearing from Meredith, hints about how I could be doing more, how I should be more grateful for their help. I had learned early on that her help always came with strings attached. Nothing was ever just given freely. Every favor had a price. My mind began racing, remembering all the times Meredith had subtly undermined me throughout my life, comments about how I wasn't quite like her real daughters, Karen's passive-aggressive remarks about how I was lucky to even be here. They had always treated me as an outsider, and now they wanted to control the very thing that had made me feel proud, my business. Karen leaned in, her tone softening, trying to make her suggestion feel more like a gift than a demand. "Look, I know it's hard to let go of control, but you're working so hard, Katie. Maybe it's time you let someone else take the weight off your shoulders. Trust us, we want to see you succeed." I knew what she was trying to do. She was appealing to my emotions, playing on my fears of failure and burnout. But I wasn't a naive child anymore. I had spent years building my brand, learning the ropes of business, and getting my hands dirty. I wasn't about to let anyone, least of all, my family, take it from me. Despite the gentle tone, I could hear the underlying message in Karen's words. You're not good enough to do it alone. Let us take over. I excused myself from the table, the words sticking in my throat. The familiar feeling of being cornered returned like I was a pawn in their game. I had spent years trying to fit into their world, trying to prove that I belonged, but it was becoming clear that they never saw me as one of them. To them, I was just a project to manage, a resource to exploit, and if I didn't let them help, they'd find another way to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me as I retreated to my office, locking the door behind me. My thoughts were a whirlwind. I had worked so hard to get here. I had fought for this success when no one else believed in me, when no one else had my back. I didn't trust them. I couldn't. But I also knew the pressure would only increase. Meredith and Karen wouldn't take no for an answer, not without a fight. The manipulation had begun, and I could feel it pulling me into their web. I had two choices. I could give in, surrender my control, and watch them take over what was mine. Or I could fight to protect it, fighting not just for my business, but for my sense of self. The decision wasn't easy, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. It was a Thursday afternoon when Meredith's subtle pressure shifted into something more direct. I had just finished a meeting with my marketing team, discussing a new campaign for my hair care line, when my phone buzzed with a message from her. Katie, we need to talk. Can you come over for dinner tonight? We've been thinking about your business. The words sent an immediate sense of dread through me, a feeling I had grown used to in the years I had spent trying to avoid being seen as the outsider in their family. I was hoping, perhaps foolishly, that it was just another passing comment about my business that I could brush off. But deep down, I knew this conversation would be different. Dinner that evening felt strained, even before we sat down. The usual banter that Meredith and Karen had with each other felt more like a rehearsed act, one they had perfected to make me feel small. As I joined them at the dining table, both of them were already seated, their faces unreadable. Meredith's posture was impeccable, as always, but there was something colder in her eyes, a glint, that made me uneasy. Karen, on the other hand, was absent-mindedly stirring her wine with a look of quiet determination. You know, Katie, Meredith began, her voice uncharacteristically blunt. You've built something impressive, but it's clear that you can't handle it on your own anymore. This business is growing too fast for someone without experience to manage. You need a professional to take over the financials. I froze mid-bite, my fork suspended in the air. Take over the financials? It sounded so casual, like she was offering a helping hand instead of a takeover. But I wasn't fooled. The look on her face told me this was no longer a suggestion, it was a demand. You're lucky to have built such a successful brand, Katie, Karen added, her tone dripping with condescension. But you've been so busy playing CEO that you haven't seen what's really going on behind the scenes. It's your company, sure, but maybe you could take a step back and let the people who know how to run things manage it properly. You can still be the face of it, like a figurehead. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had built this business from the ground up. I had spent sleepless nights perfecting formulas, figuring out the marketing strategies, and making the tough calls. But now, after all my hard work, they were suggesting I step aside and let them manage it. Meredith continued, her voice a little too smooth, I've handled financial portfolios for years. I'm confident that I could take this business to new heights. With my experience, we could triple your earnings in no time, and Karen here has all the right connections. You've got the product, Katie. You just need the right people to make it work. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. It was as if they were treating me like a child again, someone who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of running a business. But I did understand. I had understood. I had worked every hour of every day to make my business what it was, and now they were trying to convince me it wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. I set my fork down, my hands shaking as I tried to steady myself. I looked from Meredith to Karen, both of them waiting for my response, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Why would I need you to take over? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. I've been handling things fine on my own. Because you can't keep handling it alone, Karen shot back, her voice biting. It's clear you've done well so far, but you're not going to be able to keep up with the demands of a growing business. And frankly, it's a little greedy not to share the success with your family. I mean, you're doing so well, Katie. What's the harm in letting us help you? Her words stung like a sharp needle, each syllable pushing me closer to the edge of my patience. Greedy? Me? I had worked harder than anyone I knew, fought tooth and nail to prove myself to my customers, my investors, and to everyone who doubted me. I had sacrificed weekends, holidays, and relationships to make my business successful. And now they were telling me that I was the one who was greedy for not giving it away? Karen, I've worked for this, I said, my voice shaking. This isn't about being greedy. This is about my life's work, my future. I don't want to just hand it over to anyone. Meredith sighed, leaning back in her chair. Katie, darling, I don't think you understand. This isn't about handing it over, it's about growing. You've done well, yes, but there's so much potential here. You don't even know what you're missing out on. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had already decided what was best for me. I felt my chest tighten. They weren't just asking to help. They were asking to take over. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I could stop them. They had always been a powerful force in my life, and it was hard to see them as anything other than the people who had given me shelter after my mother passed. But at what cost? My mind raced, and guilt gnawed at me. Was I selfish for wanting to keep control? Was I being unreasonable for not trusting my family? But no, I couldn't let go. This was my success, my sacrifice, and the last thing I was going to do was let them rewrite my story. But I knew that they wouldn't just walk away from this. Meredith and Karen would not let this go easily. This was the first demand, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. I'm not giving up control, I said, my voice firm despite the fear creeping up inside me. I built this on my own, and I'm not about to hand it over to anyone. Meredith's face darkened. We'll see about that, she muttered under her breath. And just like that, I knew. This was no longer just about business. It was about something much deeper. My independence, my dignity, and my place in this family. I had made my decision. But I also knew this battle was far from over. The days following my refusal to give up control of my business were a blur of texts, calls, and passive-aggressive comments. Meredith and Karen had made it clear that my decision wasn't going to be taken lightly. At first, I thought they would back off, that it was just a phase, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The pressure escalated faster than I anticipated. It started subtly. Meredith would send me messages, dripping with concern. The texts always began with something innocent, like asking how my day was going or if I needed help with anything. But as soon as I replied, her tone would change. Katie, we're just trying to help you. I can't believe you're pushing us away. You're acting like you don't even care about the family anymore. I felt the sting of her words even through the phone screen. She had a way of making me feel small, like I was the one who had done something wrong. It was the same manipulation I'd grown up with, making me feel like I owed them something for simply existing in their world. Karen wasn't any better. She called one night, her voice thick with false sincerity. Katie, I don't know what happened to you. You used to be so close to Mom and me. You're not the same person anymore. Your success has changed you. The words cut deeper than I cared to admit. Was I really changing? Was success making me cold-hearted like they were saying? But that wasn't the worst part. Karen's voice took on a more biting edge as she continued. You know, Mom and I have always been there for you. We gave you a roof over your head when you had nowhere else to go, and this is how you repay us? By pushing us away? They were framing themselves as the victims again. They were always the victims. This wasn't about helping me. It was about making me feel guilty for wanting to keep my hard-earned success. Their emotional blackmail was starting to wear me down. The tipping point came when I began receiving public criticism on social media. I hadn't even realized at first, but when I logged in that evening, I was bombarded with comments from Meredith's and Karen's accounts. My notifications were flooded with messages accusing me of being greedy and ungrateful. They painted a picture of me as some spoiled, selfish daughter who had become too big for her britches. Meredith had posted a long, carefully worded statement about how disappointed she was in me, her own flesh and blood, for refusing the help that family was offering. She suggested that my refusal was a sign of my arrogance, that my success had gotten to my head. Karen's post was more venomous. Katie thinks she can do it all alone. I guess when you have money, it makes you forget the people who helped you get there. Number greedy, number selfish, number ungrateful. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My heart sank as I read the cruel words that they had spread for the world to see. I had always tried to keep my life private, but now it felt like my own family was turning everyone against me. Their posts were designed to paint me as the villain, the one who had abandoned the family who had given me everything. The guilt hit like a tidal wave. I started to wonder if they were right. Had I really become someone who didn't care about the people who helped me when I was struggling? Had I allowed my business to make me cold-hearted? I tried to tell myself that I was just being manipulated, but every time I saw their posts or received another call or text, it became harder to ignore. The guilt gnawed at me. I questioned my decision to fight for my independence. Was I being too stubborn? Too selfish? But then, as I sat alone in my office late one night, the reality of it all hit me like a slap across the face. Meredith and Karen weren't doing this out of kindness. They weren't offering help because they truly cared about me or my business. They were doing this because they wanted control. They wanted my success, not for my benefit, but for theirs. This wasn't about family. It was about power. I thought about the countless times they had undermined me over the years, pushing me into a corner, making me feel like I was never enough. I thought about all the things I had done to prove myself, how hard I worked to build my business from nothing. And now, they wanted to take it from me. They didn't want to help me grow. They wanted to own me. As the days passed, I became more certain of my decision. Meredith and Karen were never going to stop. They weren't interested in my success. They wanted to control it. They wanted to mold me into something I wasn't. And I couldn't let that happen. But it was hard. The guilt they planted in me was a difficult thing to shake off. They knew how to make me question my every move. And in those moments of weakness, I almost gave in. I almost allowed them to take what was mine. But then I remembered why I started this journey in the first place, to create something that was entirely mine, something I had worked for without anyone else's help. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about me standing up for who I was and what I had built. I realized that their actions weren't about helping me, they were about taking control, and I wasn't going to let them. The emotional manipulation was only going to get worse, but I was done feeling guilty. I had a decision to make, and I was finally ready to fight for myself. My success wasn't up for negotiation. It was mine, and I was going to keep it. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, neatly folded and sitting on top of a stack of invoices from my suppliers. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail until I saw the lawyer's letterhead. My stomach dropped. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands, the words on the page blurring as I read through it. Meredith had taken the fight to a whole new level. The letter, written by her lawyer, threatened legal action unless I handed over either full or partial control of my business to the family. I reread the letter several times, each time the weight of its implications sinking deeper into my chest. They were not only demanding a large portion of my company, but also accusing me of unfair business practices, for refusing to give them access to the financials and control of the operations. Katie Smith, it began. Our client, Meredith J. Caldwell, is deeply concerned about the operations of your hair care brand. It is her belief that you are engaging in unfair business practices by excluding family from the management of your business, especially considering the support and resources provided to you by your family over the years. The audacity of it all. The letter continued with even more chilling words. Unless you agree to a formal agreement by Friday, we will be forced to initiate legal proceedings to claim a portion of your company. Failure to comply may result in significant financial and reputational damage. I set the letter down, my hands shaking. Meredith wasn't just asking for a seat at the table anymore. She was trying to seize my business, my life's work, and with Karen's support, they were willing to escalate this into a full-blown legal battle. The reality of what was happening hit me like a wave. I had known they were manipulative, but I hadn't expected them to go this far. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a legal attack designed to break me. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity, overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of it all. How had it escalated so quickly? The worst part was the way the letter framed the situation. It made me feel as though I was the one at fault, the one who had wronged them. All of their words, ungrateful, selfish betrayal haunted me, reminding me of the social media posts they had made. They were trying to paint me as the villain in my own life, and now they were threatening to destroy everything I had worked for if I didn't comply. I didn't know what to do. My instincts screamed at me to fight back, but the weight of the legal language, the threats of lawsuits, and the emotional manipulation clouded my judgment. For a moment, I wondered if they were right. Was I being unreasonable for not allowing them to help? Was I truly being cold-hearted, like they had said? I picked up my phone and stared at it. not knowing who to call. I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems, but the pressure was suffocating. I needed someone to help me make sense of this. Without thinking, I dialed the number of my lawyer, Patricia. She was the one person who had always been there for me when it came to my business. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had asked her for advice on trademarks and contracts when I was just starting out, but now I needed her expertise more than ever. Patricia picked up after the first ring. "Katie, what's going on? You sound upset." "I got a letter from Meredith's lawyer," I said, my voice shaking. "They're threatening to sue unless I give up control of my business." There was a pause on the other end. "I'll need to see the letter," Patricia said calmly. "But from what you're telling me, they're trying to intimidate you into compliance. It's a standard tactic used to wear people down, but we can fight this." The relief I felt hearing her words was instant. She was right, this was nothing more than a power play, an attempt to bully me into giving up what I had built. Meredith and Karen had crossed a line, and it was clear that they weren't going to back down unless I stood my ground. "Patricia, I can't just let them take everything I've worked for. I've spent years building this business, and it's not just my livelihood, it's who I am. I'm not giving up control to them," I said, my voice steadying. "Good. You shouldn't have to. We're going to put together a plan to protect your business, and we'll make sure they know that you're serious about defending what's yours," Patricia replied. Her confidence was a balm to my frazzled nerves. For the first time in days, I felt like I was on solid ground, but I knew that the battle wasn't going to be easy. Meredith and Karen were willing to drag me through the mud in the court of public opinion, and they were prepared to take things to the legal system to get what they wanted. I spent the next few hours gathering documents, my business's financial statements, proof of ownership, emails, texts, everything I could find to back up my claims that the business was mine, not theirs. By the time Patricia arrived at my office the next day, I had a folder stacked with evidence. We sat down, and she helped me draft a response letter, one that would make it clear that I would not be bullied into submission. The letter I sent back wasn't just a defense of my business, it was a declaration of my intent to preserve my future, no matter what. I wouldn't let them tear me down or rob me of my independence. The legal battle was just beginning, and though I was terrified, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to fight for what was mine. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about my identity, my autonomy, and my ability to protect the life I had built from the very people who were supposed to be the ones supporting me. This was no longer just about family, it was about defending my right to exist on my own terms. The weight of the situation was slowly crushing me. Every day felt like an emotional marathon, with no end in sight. The legal threats from Meredith and Karen were relentless. But it wasn't just the letters or the public accusations that wore me down, it was the constant emotional toll. The guilt, the stress, the overwhelming sense of betrayal from the people I had once trusted the most. I could feel it eating away at me, and there were days when I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror. At first, I had hoped that everything would resolve itself. I believed that once the legal process played out, the pressure would ease, and things would go back to normal. But with each passing day, it became clear that Meredith and Karen weren't backing down. The more they pushed, the more I withdrew, retreating into the safety of my office and my thoughts. I couldn't bear the idea of facing them, not when every interaction felt like a reminder of how far apart we had drifted. Karen's messages had become more pointed, filled with venom and accusations. "You've changed," she would write, "and it's heartbreaking. I never thought you'd choose your business over your family." The guilt she wielded so effortlessly was starting to suffocate me. And then there was Meredith, who made no effort to hide her anger. Her lawyer sent follow-up letters, claiming that I was acting irrationally and that my refusal to work with them was unreasonable and ungrateful. She spun our entire history together into something twisted, painting herself as the martyr and me as the villain who had turned her back on family. The barrage of lies and manipulation was starting to break me. I had always been the strong one in my family, the one who held it together, the one who made everyone else feel secure. But now, I felt like I was unraveling. The business that had once brought me pride now felt like a burden, one I could barely carry. I spent more and more time at my desk, staring at the piles of paperwork, unable to focus on anything. Even the smallest tasks felt insurmountable. I started avoiding friends, canceling plans, and isolating myself in my apartment. I couldn't escape the constant feeling of dread that hung over me. My anxiety spiked at night, keeping me awake until the early hours, my mind racing with thoughts of Meredith and Karen. The questions swirled around in my head. Did I make the right choice? Was I being selfish? What if they were right? It was like I was losing a part of myself. The woman who had fought so hard to build her business was slipping away under the weight of the accusations. I questioned my every decision, wondering if I was, in fact, the cold-hearted person they claimed me to be. It felt as though the emotional abuse from my family was slowly suffocating me, stripping away the confidence I had once had. One morning, after another sleepless night, I couldn't take it any longer. My anxiety had reached its peak, and I found myself shaking uncontrollably as I tried to prepare for the day. That's when I realized I couldn't keep going like this. I needed help, real help, not just the well-meaning advice from friends or the endless cycle of self-doubt I was stuck in. I picked up the phone and called my therapist, Dr. Parker, who had been with me through a lot over the years. She was the one person who had always made me feel seen and heard, especially when things felt impossible. "Dr. Parker, I need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. We scheduled an emergency session that afternoon. By the time I walked into her office, I felt like a shell of the person I once was. I couldn't stop the tears from coming as I recounted everything that had happened. Meredith's threats, Karen's accusations, the feeling of being trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and fear. "Doctor," Parker listened quietly, nodding, her presence calming in a way that only she could provide. When I finished, she took a deep breath and looked at me with a gentle but firm gaze. "Katie," she said, her voice steady and comforting, "I want you to hear something very clearly. You have every right to defend what's yours. Your business, your peace, your future, it all belongs to you. What your family is doing to you is not love, it's manipulation. They are using guilt and emotional blackmail to try to control you, and you don't owe them anything." I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. The constant gaslighting from Meredith and Karen wasn't about helping me. It was about taking control. They were using their family status to try and bully me into submission, to take away everything I had worked so hard for. "Doctor," Parker continued, "you've spent years trying to please people who have never truly had your best interests at heart, and now you're paying the price. It's time to let go of the guilt and recognize that you are allowed to stand up for yourself, even if it means making difficult decisions about your family." Her words hit me like a light bulb going off in the dark. All of the pain, the guilt, and the fear I had been carrying were the result of trying to keep peace with people who didn't deserve it. My success wasn't something to feel guilty for. It was something I had earned, and I had the right to protect it. "I'm tired of feeling like I'm wrong," I said, the words finally tumbling out. "I'm tired of trying to make everyone happy while they tear me down." "Doctor," Parker nodded, "you don't need their approval to be successful, Katie. You've already proven that." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "Doctor," Parker helped me realize that the emotional fallout I was experiencing wasn't about me being a bad person, it was about me fighting for my independence and my peace. And that was worth everything. I left her office that afternoon with a renewed sense of clarity. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I couldn't let Meredith and Karen's manipulation control my life any longer. I had a right to protect my business, and I would. The turning point had come. I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I was fighting for my right to be free from the toxic control of my family. And this time, I wouldn't back down. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm cloud hanging over my head. I sat in the courthouse waiting room, my hands clammy with nervous sweat as I reviewed the legal documents one final time. The case had been building up for months, but now it was here. The battle for control of my business, my livelihood, was about to be fought in front of a judge, and nothing would ever be the same again. I had never imagined that the family I once trusted could bring me to this point. The tension in the air was palpable. Meredith and Karen had painted me as the villain in this narrative from the very beginning, calling me selfish, greedy, and ungrateful for rejecting their help. They had tried to sway public opinion, posting online rants and accusing me of turning my back on them after all they had done for me. But none of that mattered now. In this room, the only thing that mattered was the law. My lawyer, Patricia, sat beside me, her face calm but focused. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal. She had walked me through every legal step, explained the complexities of business ownership and property law, and reassured me that the truth was on my side. "This is your fight, Katie," she had told me the night before. "You've got the documentation, the facts, and the proof. Just remember, you're not just fighting for your business. You're fighting for your right to exist on your own terms. You're not the villain here." Her words echoed in my mind as the doors to the courtroom opened. I took a deep breath and followed her inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Meredith and Karen were already seated across the room, looking poised and confident in their matching designer outfits. Their smug expressions made my stomach churn, but I refused to let them see how much they had gotten to me. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to back down. The courtroom was filled with a sense of anticipation as the judge, a stern woman in her 60 seconds, took her seat. "Court is now in session," she declared, and with those words, the battle began. Meredith's lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, stood up to present their case first. He painted me as a callous, entitled woman who had turned her back on her family and was using my business to exclude those who had supported me. His arguments were filled with emotional manipulation, trying to frame my refusal to work with Meredith and Karen as a sign of moral failure. "We have evidence to show that Miss Smith has refused to cooperate with her family, despite their generous offers to help her grow her business," he said, gesturing toward Meredith and Karen. "Her refusal has caused unnecessary conflict, and as the rightful benefactors of her success, Meredith and Karen have a legal claim to a portion of her business. We are here to restore balance and fairness." The words stung, but I remained focused. They were trying to make it look like I had wronged them, but I knew better. I had never asked for their help. They had inserted themselves into my life, and now they were trying to take everything I had worked for. Patricia stood up when it was our turn to present our case. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm but powerful, "this case isn't about family loyalty or emotional manipulation. It's about ownership, responsibility, and the right to run a business that I built from the ground up. My client, Katie Smith, is the sole owner of this company. The accusations from the plaintiffs are baseless and designed to undermine her right to manage her own affairs." As Patricia laid out the facts, the tension in the room shifted. She presented our evidence, financial statements, emails, and texts, showing that I had always been in control of the business, that Meredith and Karen had no legal claim to it. She pointed to the emails where I had explicitly stated my refusal to hand over control, and she cited the moments when Meredith had used her family status to try and coerce me into compliance. But the most powerful piece of evidence was the ownership documents. The company was mine, and mine alone. Meredith and Karen had no legal standing to demand a stake in it, and Patricia made that clear. "The defendants here are trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage," Patricia said, her voice gaining strength. "Katie has worked tirelessly for years to build this company. This is her business, and no one, not even her family, has the right to take it from her." The room fell silent as Patricia's words hung in the air. I could see Meredith and Karen shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Their lawyer had no response to the irrefutable evidence we presented. They had no case. The judge leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the documents. After what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "I've reviewed the evidence, and it's clear that the plaintiff's claims are without merit. Katie Smith is the sole owner of this business, and no legal claim has been made by the defendants to show otherwise." My heart skipped a beat as I heard the words I had been waiting for. "I rule in favor of the defendant," the judge said firmly. "Katie Smith will remain the CEO of her company." The lawsuit is dismissed. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was immediately followed by an overwhelming sadness. I had won the case, but the emotional cost was heavy. I had fought for my business, for my independence, but in the process, I had lost my family. The people I had always tried to please, the people I thought would support me, had turned on me. And no matter the victory in court, the damage was done. As I stood up, my legs shaky but strong, I locked eyes with Meredith and Karen. Meredith's face was flushed with anger, while Karen looked like a petulant child who had been denied her way. They didn't even acknowledge me as I walked out of the courtroom, their defeat written all over their faces. In that moment, I realized something. This victory wasn't just about protecting my business. It was about reclaiming my life. I had fought for my right to be who I was without their interference. I left the courthouse with my head held high, but the weight of the emotional toll lingered. Yes, I had won, but the true cost of this battle would take much longer to heal. The days following the court ruling were a blur of emotions. As I left the courthouse, my head was still spinning from the intense legal battle, and though the weight of the victory was a relief, The loss it came with felt heavier than anything I could have anticipated. I had won control of my business, the very thing I had worked so hard for, but I had also lost something far more important: my family. Meredith and Karen refused to accept the judge's ruling, just as I had feared. The tension between us reached an almost unbearable point. Meredith, who had always considered herself the matriarch of the family, refused to speak to me at all. She made it clear in her passive-aggressive way that she felt betrayed and disrespected. "You'll regret this, Katie," she had texted me a week after the hearing. "Your success means nothing if you don't have the support of your family." It was a classic Meredith move, trying to make me feel guilty, as if it were somehow my fault that the situation had escalated to this point. I hadn't even wanted the fight to begin with. I had only wanted to keep what was mine, what I had built from nothing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Meredith had always seen me as a tool for her own personal gain, just as Karen had. My victory was theirs to take, and without it, they were willing to cut me out completely. Karen's response was equally harsh. Instead of trying to work through the bitterness, she lashed out in a different way, pulling away from me emotionally. She posted more about me on social media, cryptic messages about betrayal, how family wasn't supposed to turn on each other, and how disappointed she was in me. It was as if she was trying to incite others to turn against me, painting me as the villain in a story I didn't even want to be part of. For a long time I questioned everything. I had given so much of myself to these people, sacrificing pieces of my own happiness for their approval, only to have them turn on me when I stood up for myself. How could they not see that this wasn't about them? This wasn't about taking something away from them. It was about protecting the life I had built and claiming the independence I deserved. But despite the anguish, I couldn't let myself drown in guilt. I had made my decision, and I knew it had been the right one. I had to remind myself daily that I wasn't the one who had started this fight. My business, my success, was mine. It wasn't for Meredith to control, nor was it something Karen had any claim to. But the emotional toll was real, and the grief of losing them was something I couldn't just shake off. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, my mind racing with thoughts of everything that had happened. The weight of the estrangement was crushing. I missed the days when I was part of a family, when we celebrated together and I could lean on them for support. Now, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. But slowly, something changed. I began to realize that while I had lost them, I hadn't lost everything. I still had my business, my independence, and most importantly, I had myself. I had fought for my right to be who I was, and no matter how painful the consequences, I couldn't undo that. I started the process of healing, though I knew it would take time. I took a step back from the emotional wreckage and focused on rebuilding my life and my mental health. I started seeing Dr. Parker more regularly, each session giving me a little more peace. We worked through the guilt, the shame, and the anger that I had been holding onto for so long. I was learning that it was okay to let go of toxic relationships, even if they were with family. I was learning that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. As I worked on healing, I also began to reconnect with people who truly supported me, friends, colleagues, and a professional network of like-minded entrepreneurs who understood the challenges of running a business. They reminded me of the woman I had been before the battle, strong, confident, and focused. They celebrated my victories, no matter how small, and encouraged me when I doubted myself. One of my close friends, Emily, who had been there for me from the very beginning, was especially instrumental in helping me through the aftermath. "Katie, you've been through hell," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "But you're here. You made it through. You didn't just survive, you won." Her words, though simple, had a profound effect on me. I hadn't just survived this ordeal, I had won. I had reclaimed my business, my independence, and my dignity, and now it was time to build the life I deserved, one that didn't revolve around the toxic influence of Meredith and Karen. Slowly, I started to find joy in things again. I threw myself into my business, expanding the product line and launching a new marketing campaign that I had been dreaming about for months. I began speaking at conferences and mentoring young entrepreneurs, giving back to a community that had supported me when my own family couldn't. There were still moments of grief, moments when I missed the idea of having a family to share my success with. But with time, I realized that the family I had built through friendships, colleagues, and my own efforts was far more valuable than the one I had tried to hold on to. I wasn't alone. I had people who believed in me, and that was enough. I had worked too hard, fought too fiercely, and sacrificed too much to let anyone define my worth anymore. The emotional cost of the battle would always be there, but it no longer held the same power over me. I had found peace in my decision to fight for myself, and that peace was more valuable than anything my family could ever give me. As I looked out at the skyline from my office window, I couldn't help but smile. I had come a long way, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, I was no longer afraid to walk it alone. Because in the end, I knew I wasn't truly alone. I had myself, and that was enough. How many times have you told yourself you'll get to it tomorrow? How many opportunities have you missed because you didn't take action when you had the chance? If you've been putting off taking control of your future, how much longer are you willing to wait? The truth is, every moment you delay is a moment wasted your time, your potential, slipping away. Don't you deserve to have the best in your life? Don't you deserve to stay ahead, to be informed, to make the changes you've been thinking about for so long? By not subscribing, you're choosing to stay stuck. You're choosing to ignore the tools, insights, and inspiration that could help you move forward. So, ask yourself, how much longer are you going to wait before you start investing in yourself? Now's the time to act. Don't let another day go by without taking the first step toward the success you know you deserve. Subscribe now because your future is too important to keep putting off.